You just told us 157 incidents in 2019. Yes, 157 pollution incidents is 157 too many. Of course, there's no mention of the 30,000 sewage pollution incidents in 2018. So I think we do need a little bit of perspective when we discuss these issues. Now, you mentioned that you wanted to work in collaboration. I'd commend that. You might wish to collaborate with Natural Resources Wales, who told us, of course, that 92% of Wales's agricultural land is not at risk of causing nitrate pollution. And their advice is that we move from the current 2.3% of Wales as designated NVZ to 8%. Now, your regulatory impact assessment, or the draft RIA, considered only two options. One was the do-nothing option, which nobody, not even the farming unions, are advocating. And the other was to apply measures to address agricultural pollution to the whole of Wales. So why did your RIA only focus on the two extremes, one of which was never a realistic option in the first place?
The reason I have had a pause or a delay in bringing these regulations forward, because, as I said, I wanted to look at the most evidence that was available for us. I certainly saw the first draft of the RIA. I am now approaching, in my very large folder, I think the RIA is about document 18. I'm coming to that. I will see what difference there is from the draft, if any. But I am not in a position to answer that specific question at the current time because I am reviewing all the evidence that we've got. And you're quite right, we see pollution right across Wales in different forms. Diffuse pollution is equally is important. And again, NRW have had their challenges and choices consultation in 2019. But if you know, that identified diffuse pollution from agricultural sector as the reason for 113 water bodies across Wales failing to meet good status. So, you know, there's lots of issues around pollution that we need to be looking at because it's imperative that we sort this problem out now.
But the fact remains that NRW is not supporting the proposal to make the whole of Wales an NVZ, and whilst there are incidents and, you know, those need to be tackled, clearly they feel that doing so across 8% of Wales would be sufficient to address the issue. And we all look forward to seeing the regulatory impact assessment because the draft one was only a 20-page document, and for a change this substantial, then we really need something a bit more robust than that. And I'll leave it at that. But of course, if we do move, or if you want to pursue a whole territory approach, then we need to be convinced that that is the best way forward. And I'm not convinced, and I haven't seen the evidence out there that tells us that a whole territory NVZ will actually be effective in reducing agricultural pollution, because information obtained again from Natural Resources Wales provides no substantive evidence of the effectiveness of the NVZ action programme in reducing agricultural pollution, despite designations dating back to 2002. We've seen numerous scientific research papers which consider, again, the effectiveness or otherwise of NVZs, and they tell us that the approach has little or no effect, with some highlighting actually detrimental effects as well. One study found, and I quote, that 69% of NVZs showed no significant improvement in surface water concentrations even after 15 years. And that, and I quote again, in comparison to a control catchment, 29% of NVZs showed a significant improvement, that's positive, but 31% showed a significant worsening. So where's your evidence that a whole territory NVZ approach will actually have the effect that so many of us want to see?
Well, as I said, I'm currently, you know, there haven't been that many hours that I've been awake and not been in work to give me the time to read, as I say, this very, very large body of evidence, which I want to give my full consideration to. It's, you know, we had a consultation on this back in 2016. This is not something that we're rushing towards. This has been a very long process. Some would say too long. But it is really important that we get it right, and I will publish as much as I can to show how that policy has been derived.
It just begs the question, how much consideration had you given to previous iterations of these proposals, or whether you'd been involved at all, because you sound as if you're disowning what we've had so far, because you haven't had a chance to look at the file that you've now been provided with. So I think there are big questions there about who's making decisions or bringing forward suggestions around this. Now, I've hinted earlier that there could well be unforeseen or maybe foreseen negative consequences from what seemed to be your previous approach. Now, we we not only know that there are huge spikes in nitrate levels in those areas where we've seen in the past closed periods, nitrate spiking immediately before the closed period and immediately after for obvious reasons, but also there is concern that there could well be a loss of cattle from Welsh farms and subsequent reduction in mixed grazing on Welsh uplands. Now, farms with 20 or 30 suckler cows, they're not going to invest tens of thousands of pounds in new infrastructure to meet the requirements of these new regulations because they're wholly disproportionate to the low levels of stock that they keep. And they're telling me that the choice for them, therefore, is to go out of cattle farming, and that will bring with it, of course, the subsequent consequences to upland habitats and biodiversity, but also to the wider beef sector here in Wales. Now, environmental organisations are concerned about that potential outcome. Hybiki Cymru is also concerned at the potential outcome to the wider beef sector. Now, nobody here is saying don't do anything, and that needs to be understood and heard by everyone. But as far as I'm concerned, so far, the government has clearly failed to make the case for your proposals or to provide evidence that justifies the approach that you seem to wish to pursue. So I would ask you to revisit again these proposals and please to look at the 45 recommendations that came from the Agricultural Pollution Subgroup, which of course should have been properly considered as part of the regulatory impact assessment that has been available in draft form.
But to start with your first point, I'm certainly not disowning, and I've been very involved since I've been in this portfolio. I mentioned there had been a consultation before I came into portfolio. It was one of the very first things on my desk. And what came from that was a voluntary approach, working with the farming unions particularly and other stakeholders. And you may be aware of a scheme that came forward from 2 Pembrokeshire farmers. I worked with the farming unions to make sure that voluntary scheme had time to work. And you can see by the number of incidents, it's clearly not working. And that's why we have to do something now. That's why we have to move to regulation. So that's in answer to your first point. The advice I've been given this week is the advice that I've been waiting for around regulation. And I'm certainly giving it my very thorough time and consideration because, as I say, we need to get this absolutely right. Regarding your second point, every farm is different, so it's really not possible to specify exactly which measures would apply to an upland farm, for example. So you're talking about thousands and thousands of pounds when we don't know what each farm will need. I've made it very clear that we will provide some additional capital funding, but not to bring farms up to legal requirements. So I will be making an announcement, certainly by the middle of February, and obviously members will be the first to hear.